All right. You know what time it is. Neil Ratner Rock Talk here with a story. So, my old friend Keith Emerson would have celebrated his birthday this past week, but a few years ago, as we all know, Keith was overtaken by depression and chose to end his life. So today, in honor of my friend, I thought I would tell you a few things about Keith Emerson that you might not know. And as usual, a little background first. All right, so I'm going to start by reading a paragraph of my first impressions of Keith from my book, Rock Talk. Keith Emerson was one of the world's best and most dynamic keyboard players. He appeared on stage like something from outer space, wearing tight silver gray pants and a short silver jacket, accented by extremely exaggerated shoulders. Knee-high black leather boots with heavy silver buckles completed the outfit. The centerpiece of his rig was a Moog synthesizer, a massive piece of electronics with many crossed wires and flashing colored lights, which stood above his Hammond B3 organ. Keith's love and knowledge of classical music and his groundbreaking use of electronics set the tone for the band. All right. So the first time I ever actually saw Keith was when I was road manager for Edgar Winter's White Trash. And we did a gig in Boston at the Hatch Memorial Shell, and we were the opening act for ELP. And it was like, oh my God, what is this? Never expecting that, maybe a year later or so, I'd be working for ELP. But yeah, they were like something from outer space, like they came from another planet. Never saw anything like a group like that, between Keith and his Moog, and Carl and his massive drum set, and Greg Lake and his beautiful white leather suit. They were really a trip. All right, now, interestingly, Keith never had any real formal training, except his father was a telephone engineer who played piano on the side and arranged for some lessons when he was young. But as Keith once told me, the teachers were little old ladies, local people with limited knowledge and limited skill. But he did learn a little bit about classical music, which inspired him. And I'm going to start. Well, yeah, okay. So obviously the classical music inspired him. Now, Keith listened to jazz on the radio, and he used sheet music from Dave Brubeck and George Shearing, and learned about jazz piano from books. And it was his interest in jazz that led him to the Hammond organ. But it was a chance encounter at a record store that led him to his first Moog. Now, switched on, it's a funny story, so I'm going to tell it to you. Keith went into this local record store, and an album called Switched On Bach was playing. You might have heard of it, an album back in the 60s. Oh, I'm trying to remember who did it. Carlos something. Can't remember. At any rate, Switched On Bach. So that was playing in the store, and it freaked Keith out. After asking the store owner about the record, and he was told about, I wish I could think of the guy's name, but it doesn't matter, and the fact that it was a synthesizer. So Keith, at that point, having heard that, he had to have one. Now, he was in the band The Nice at the time, and they just happened to have an upcoming concert at London's Royal Festival Hall. And they were going to be accompanied by the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. Keith had a friend named Mike Vickers from Manfred Mann's band, and Mike owned one of the first, if not the first, Moog in England, and he not only lent it to Keith for the gig, but since Keith knew very little about it, he came to the gig and set it up for Keith. Now, I have to tell you, as technological as Keith's rig looked, he was anything but that. And many ways was a technophobe. We always, when I traveled with them, we always had a special technician traveling with us just to deal with Keith's keyboards. So, as crazy as they looked, That's how crazy hard they were to keep working and keep in tune, and especially the way Keith abused the organ every night. So we really had a guy, his name was Bill Huff. He was an interesting character, had some kind of a dark background that nobody knew, and he was kind of a mysterious figure. But, without him, I don't think we could have played, because almost every night there was a problem, some kind of problem with Keith's rig. Now, off stage, Keith was the opposite of what you saw on stage. I've talked about that many times. He was shy, soft-spoken, somewhat withdrawn. He and I got along really well, and of all the guys in the band, I think we continued our friendship the longest. He invited me to his house down in Nassau, and Eleanor, his wife, and his son Adam, which you'll hear about, came to my apartment in New York. And, we had a nice relationship, lost touch for many, many years, and then fortunately reconnected about a year or two before he died. So I had the opportunity to go out to California and have dinner with him, and it was really nice. All right. Now, as I said, the last time was about 2 years before he died, and I had dinner with Keith and his girlfriend, and again, it was great. At the time, Keith was excited about an album he had recently done called The Three Fates Project with Mark Bonilla and noted Norwegian conductor Terje Mikkelsen. If you get a chance, you should check it out. It's quite interesting. One of the last things Keith Emerson ever did. And when I told him at the time, when I met him, I was just starting to write my book, Rock Doc. He said, "You got to write the book, man." He had heard about my Michael Jackson trials and tribulations, and he said, "I wrote a book. I'm glad you're writing a book. Keep writing." And he gave me an autographed copy of his book, and it was really a great visit. Now, a few years ago, I went to London. Unfortunately, Greg Lake is also no longer with us, and maybe next weekend I'll do a little story on Greg, because this coming week, I believe, would have been Greg's birthday. And a couple of years ago, I was invited to speak at a tribute for Greg in London, and to my great surprise, Keith's family was there, and I hadn't seen his ex-wife, Eleanor, in over 40 years. And, I told you Eleanor and his son Aaron had come to my apartment in the city, and I hadn't seen Aaron since way back when, and he was a very little boy then, and, he was a grown man now. And it was great. It was just great to see them and to reconnect. At any rate, it was really nice and a completion of sorts, What else can I tell you about Keith Emerson? As good as you think he was better. I got to see him close up many, many nights, and his talent on the keyboards was beyond belief. Also, I've told the story many times. I'll tell it one more time. I was fortunate when we were touring the U.S. and we played Buffalo. Keith had made arrangements to go to Bob Moog's house, and he invited me to go with him. So I got to spend an afternoon with Keith and Bob Moog at Bob Moog's house in Buffalo. That was incredible. Had no idea what they were talking about, but I was just overwhelmed to be a part of that, discussion. Not that I contributed in any way, but I was there. So that was kind of cool. And again, what can I say? At least we have Keith's music. And if you're not familiar with him, check it out. And I think you'll be as impressed as everybody else was with his talent. All right. That's my story for today. I hope you enjoyed it. More stories this weekend. 3 o'clock Saturday and Sunday, iHeartRadio, WDST, Radio Woodstock. Some good stories. I'll have another story tomorrow, and you know where to find me around the internet. All right. As I always like to tell you, always remember to keep on rocking, and I'll see you somewhere real soon. Bye for now.